Warning, this episode may contain content that is not suitable for children. Viewer discretion is advised.
Because of how I was going mentally, I wasn't coping because I had through it all, because I had such a low self-image and self-worth through it all, that I would have got to the point where I would have I guess we're touching another issue there, but I actually got to the point where I was suicidal. And so I would have either gone the divorce route or I would have left in that respects. And so God kept us going. And so I honestly don't know how people go through it all without God. I can't comprehend that because of the direction I was heading already. Yeah.
Welcome everyone to another episode of LED Live. We hear so many times as we go around to different places speaking how you all will join us either on a Friday night or different times of the day. And it's kind of surreal when you think about that, when you're sitting in our seat. And so we're humbled and blessed to invite you into this conversation. And today we have a guest. Her name is Samantha, and she's all the way in Australia. So she got up early this morning to be with us in the afternoon. And Samantha is the wife of someone who had a pornography addiction. So we're going to talk about that today. So if that's been your experience, or you know somebody who's had that, or maybe you've been a pornography addict yourself, that's the things we're going to talk about. So welcome, and come on in, pull up a seat, and be a part of the conversation today. So we got Mikey and Danique, and this is Sam, as she likes to go by. So Sam, welcome. Thank you for joining us today and for being a part of this program and reaching out to us. And we want to understand this topic better for ourselves and for those people that are watching. So thank you for doing this. So I guess the place, they always say the best place to start is the beginning, right? So, where does this journey for you start? I mean, I'm guessing you probably didn't know before you got married.
Actually, I did.
You did?
Wow.
Oh, okay. Now I'm
That's
surprised.
shocking. Yeah, we're all shocked.
That is. So you knew that was a problem, but you got married anyway.
Yeah, I was very naive and arrogant.
Okay.
Going into the marriage.
Were you a Christian when you got married?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, long story short, I left God, I came back to God, and I had been back building my relationship with God for probably 5 years before I met Nathaniel. And I was very, I guess, because I had failed relationships in the past, I was very adamant that I wasn't going to get married. And but if there was potential, then I had very strict rules in regards to what that looked like. So even before he asked me to be his girlfriend, I was very blunt with him in regards of like, if this is heading the direction that it's looking like, you need to know that I'm not a virgin. And so that's who I am, take it or leave it. I'm quite happy if he didn't want to pursue me anymore because of that. And he was actually very gracious. And he said to me, well, there's something you need to know about me, in that I'm struggling with pornography.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay. And so he kind of gave me the same option. And so we still decided to pursue each other and start dating for marriage. And I was very naive in regards of, I thought in my head that once we got married that it would stop because I would be satisfying the need in some respects. And so, but I was very wrong. So that's kind of where it all started from that perspective.
How did you, or at what point in your marriage did you realize this isn't stopping, it's not going away, and it is a problem that needs to be addressed? How much time are we talking about?
So it was about 12 months. We had been married 12 months, and I hadn't actually asked him the question directly about whether he was still using or not. And so I was kind of happily ignorant because I guess in some respects we had a very active sex life. And so the thought didn't even cross my head that he was still using. And so, it was after 12 months, I actually kind of broached the topic kind of tentatively and asked the question how he was going with it. We hadn't talked about it. And that's when he said that he had still been using, and I just lost it. I just broke down and cried, and but he was honest with me after 12 months. So that was nice when I asked him.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I find it, I'm thinking of some people who, as married couples, they might be both agreeing to watch pornography either together or just being okay with the other spouse. And, in this case, you said, you were having an active sex life. For those people who are watching, and I'm just trying to kind of answer their question, they might say, well, look, you had a good active sex life, and we have an active sex life, but we both agreed to watch pornography. What's the harm? Could you kind of answer that question for people who might be having that?
Sure. So basically the cut and thrust of it is that even if you are actively watching pornography together as a married couple, by biblical standards, that if you lust after a woman in your heart, then you have committed adultery already. Yeah. And so my response to that is, well, God created sex as a very intimate part of a married couple. And so that sort of thing, to be able to broach into watching pornography together, both of you, in my perspective, the Bible is very clear in regards of you're both actually committing adultery in your heart, because it's also where your mind's at and where your attitude and your intention of why you actually have sex. And so that is very important as well. And so, that's kind of, it's all a bit in the head, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I really like following Fight the New Drug. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
No, I'm not.
So Fight the New Drug is a non-religious, non-legislative, and non-politically biased organization that is like literally, they're not Christian, but they speak against pornography. And they're pretty well known now in the US. They have their own podcast. They advocate against the use of pornography. And so I checked some of their resources, and some of the things they say is that how pornography is really bad for the brain. It increases violence, and very often people will also copy whatever they're watching in pornography and bring it into their own sex life, which is usually just not even close to being realistic, and they have these expectations of their spouse that are just actually really harmful. So I find that really interesting, and I totally agree with you that it's for many reasons it's very unhealthy for one's sex life.
Yeah, well, actually, there was I remember before I got married, I remember reading a news article of a bloke who he was addicted to pornography, and he actually masturbated like over 20 times a day. Wow. And it ended up killing him. Like there was a direct correlation between him doing that and his death. So that was very interesting reading that too.
That's crazy.
Wow.
So you said that you were kind of naive and ignorant when this happened. You didn't see any kind of red flags or anything in your marriage, like in your sex life or anything that made you think, why are you doing that, or anything?
Not initially. I think because in the first 12 months of marriage, you're very honeymoon phase. Right. And so I had rose-colored glasses on and was quite happy to be ignorant, I guess, about it. And I guess because I didn't actually have a proper conversation specifically about it with someone that I trusted about, what are things to expect. And as much as I had a very supportive family, and my family was very open about talking about sex, I guess I kind of didn't broach the topic more specifically about pornography use and looking at red flags. And but yeah, I was so blissfully ignorant that I didn't even pick up on the red flags. it wasn't until after that, the initial 12 months after that, that I actually started picking up on some more red flags, because we've been married now for over 5 years. And so it's been from there that I started to actually click. It's like, oh, hang on a minute. When this happens, it can indicate that he's using. And so
do you have any examples off the top of your head? Can you name any of those examples of the red flags?
Yeah, actually, specifically when he said no to sex to me, was generally an indicator, especially if we hadn't had sex in like a week or so.
Wow.
Because he would, I guess I'm trying to go into how much detail I give. Generally, we would be having sex on 2-3 times a week sort of thing. But, if something happened and we just hadn't got there sort of thing, if I then start to pursue him in that regards, and he says no to me, especially if if he's not long had a shower, or we're not long getting into bed sort of thing, that would be an indication to me. It's like, oh, okay, something happened while he was showering. That because usually it takes him a little bit to get going after he's done it the once sort of thing. Right. And so those kind of were red flags for me in regards of the fact that he would deny me, if that makes sense. And he has every right to say no to sex just as much as I have every right to say no to sex. Depends on the day and what's been going on. But that was one of the examples that I picked up on.
It sounds like what you're alluding to, if I'm understanding you correctly, is the pornography was now also responsible for leading to a solo sexual experience where you were not wanted or desired, because he had already had that, temporary physical fulfillment. And did you know that was part of the pornography experience? Did you know that from the get-go, or did it take you a little while to figure that out?
It took me a little bit to figure that out, to be able to put the pieces of it together, especially because I didn't talk to anybody.
Okay.
And especially in depth in regards of, what does it look like sort of thing. I know that at the same time, through all this, he was feeling extremely guilty and ashamed because, as we've gone through our journey, he's voiced these things because he would feel very, very guilty about not being able to then satisfy me in some respects, because he was content. He was happy with what he had done. And so because he's always been a firm believer in regards of that in a marriage that the husband should satisfy the wife, he was feeling quite a lot of guilt and shame when he did say no to me on the times where he had used.
So how did it impact you emotionally when this all went on?
Very badly.
Yeah.
So I was feeling very unworthy. I wasn't feeling attractive. I wasn't feeling like I was being up to the standard as a wife should be. I felt like that I wasn't, because I'm a little bit of a chunkier girl. I wouldn't say super overweight, but I'm chunkier. And so I then brought back the struggles I was having because I was not the ideal body type as the world standards. So, yeah, I was feeling, very much not good enough as a wife, not attractive. There must be something wrong with me. How could he do this to me when, he vowed that he would love me and not hurt me and all these things. And, yeah.
I came across this female through Fight the New Drugs social media, actually, or it might have been through their podcast, Consider Before Consuming. And she has her own Instagram where she talks very openly about her experiences with her husband when he was addicted to pornography. And I recently saw a post from her where she said that apparently because of his pornography consumption, she felt the need to put in breast implants. And it even got that far that the breast implants started merging with her own breast tissue, and she needed to get surgery done to get it removed. Praise the Lord that he came to a conclusion that pornography was not what he was supposed to be doing. He was hurting his wife, and he quit. And now they're both openly advocating against it. But it really shows how much of an emotional impact this kind of behavior actually has. Yeah,
so it's not a victimless crime, as I say. It's not just like, well, it's only me. What she doesn't know won't hurt her or whatever. There's a fallout that comes with being addicted to pornography, where your wife isn't feeling like she measures up or can satisfy her husband the way the porn is or whatever. So it's definitely harmful for relationships.
Mm-hmm. Throughout our marriage life, I did a lot of crash diets, and so to try and fit the norm.
What do you mean by crash diet? Like where you just diet really hard and it doesn't end up working? Is that what a crash diet is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I remember I went on this particular diet where I had to take these supplements, and I cut out all carbs and everything, and I lost I think it was about 12 kilos in the space of about 6 weeks.
Wow.
And it was not healthy at all. And then of course you bounce back, and then you add the extra weight that you've lost as well. So that's kind of crash diet. So I did a lot of that.
Wow.
There's I think what you have is probably the typical human response. Probably anybody would feel that way. But I think it's interesting that you start to absorb the guilt upon yourself, even though he was the one that really had the problem. And so automatically you start taking the blame for an act that he's the one choosing to do. That's kind of an interesting psychological phenomenon. I think a lot of people do that. I'm not saying it's right, but it's fascinating how the mind works. And, we'll think that we're the problem. It must be us. It's not their fault, that kind of thing. Okay. So you kind of go into your marriage, your eyes are, I guess, both pretty wide open, you might say, at least as wide open as you know that they are. You realize this becomes a problem. Are you both, where are you at in your religious experience? Are you both going to church? Do you have, you're surrounded by supportive friends and family? Like, what does that look like at the time that you confront him and everything kind of blows up?
So ours was kind of a prolonged journey in the respects of until he got help. So after the first 12 months, we were actively going to church. I probably wasn't going to church as often as he was, actually, because I was working a lot.
Okay.
So I was working, between 40 and 45 hours a week. And so I was just exhausted by the time Sabbath came around. So he was actually going to church more than I was. And we actually lived in Bundaberg in Queensland, and I had moved there by myself. I knew of some friends up there. And so we were basically around his support network. So his family, his friends, as much as they became my family and my friends, there's still a slightly different dynamic when you come into that kind of circle.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure how many of his friends or which ones of them knew that this is what he was dealing with, because my husband's he's a bit more of an introvert. And so to talk about like deeply personal things with his close friends can be a bit of a challenge for him. So I'm not entirely sure at what point one of his close friends, I know by midway through, one of his close friends definitely knew. I just wasn't entirely sure when that was broached with them. So I was basically up there kind of basically by myself. There was one of my friends that I could talk to because her husband was going through a similar thing. But because she was in the midst of it, I couldn't get really any kind of support or help from her. And I didn't tell my parents either. I have a very close relationship with my family, but they were, 11 odd hours travel away from me. And so it was all phone calls and like FaceTime and things like that. And I didn't talk to my family at all about what was going on. And so I basically had no support. My only support was basically God and me struggling with God in regards of like, how does this work? And, how does my relationship with you equate to the fact that my husband's doing this? Does that mean, because my husband's doing this, does that make me less in your sight, God? And so that's kind of where I was at with my relationship with God and my church going experience. So I wouldn't say that I was actively studying the Bible, but I was there was a lot of prayer, and there was still that aspect of kind of trying to figure out how my relationship with God works through all this.
So how did it impact your relationship with the Lord? Was it like, a struggle to trust him because of it? Or, I'm just curious.
So it, in a lot of respects, it drove me to more prayer, but it basically, I guess in some respects, I somewhat blamed God, because I'm like, you gave me this husband and he's doing this. What am I meant to do with this? So I guess it not so much broke down a little bit of trust with me and God. It was more of a trying to understand why this was happening. And, God, I'm not strong enough to be able to deal with this and cope with this. So I guess in looking back at it, it drew me closer to God in some respects, but in other respects, I pushed away a bit too.
I'm curious, when you said that you actually questioned if this was something that was coming on you in your spiritual life, like you wondered, if my husband is doing this, is this a reflection on me in your sight? So like we were talking about, it's not a victimless crime. It's even affecting your spiritual life in a sense that you wonder if maybe it's coming between you and God. That's just interesting. I never thought about that before. Did you feel like you were in some way, what's the word, like enabling it or something? Because you were, I don't know, not addressing it sooner or something?
I guess in some respects you could look at that way in regards of enabling, because I didn't, for myself, I didn't seek help and I didn't speak out about it. Like I would, every couple of months I would ask him, are you still using, are you, looking at pornography and masturbation? And he would give me kind of non-direct answers. He'd be like, oh, I'm struggling with it a little bit, or, I've been pretty good this week, or something like that.
I guess, I have a couple of questions now that I'm thinking through all this. One is, at what point did you decide or seek like some substantial help, and who did you go to? Did you go to like an online resource? Did you talk to somebody in person? And I'm not discounting like your experience with God wasn't good enough. You might tell us, no, it was God all the way. I didn't ever go to anybody. That's fine. I'm just trying to figure out, at what point did things start changing for the better because you came to a point where you can work through it?
Well, unfortunately, it had to change for the worse before it actually changed for the better.
Okay.
Because it wasn't until I think at our 3-year marriage mark that we ended up moving. So where I'm currently living is in Coonabarabran in New South Wales, Australia. And we moved out here with my family because my family bought property, and my husband and I, we kind of didn't know what we were doing at that point because of all COVID and stuff. And so we moved out here with them and was helping out on their property. And I guess in some respects, I just got to the breaking point where like all through our marriage so far, I had been asking him and checking on him in regards of, how are you doing? It might be a good idea for you to get help. And he was like, no, I'm fine. I'm doing it with God and I, God and I are sorting it out, sort of thing. And in my head, I'm like, oh, it doesn't look like it, sort of thing. And so once we moved out here, I asked him again at one point when we were living out here, how are you going with it? Are you still using? I was very direct. And he said yes. And I had got to the point where I'm like, you know what? I'm tired of this. I'm tired of feeling like this. I'm tired of feeling that I'm not good enough, and that, you still feel the desire to go to that when I'm right here, sort of thing. And so coming up to that point, he had actually told me, so I need to tell this part a little bit. My mum and I are very good friends, as much as she's my mum. She's been my best friend for a long time, and I would talk to her about anything and everything. But up until the point where I'd had enough, Nathaniel had actually said to me, don't talk to your mum about this. Not in a mean way, but in the way that he was ashamed. And so if he thought that if my parents found out, then, he would feel the guilt and the shame and all that kind of stuff associated with it, even more so.
Yeah.
And so he had told me that I wasn't allowed to talk to my mum. And so at that 3-year mark, I'd had enough. And so I spoke to my mum about it. And I said, look, this is what I'm dealing with. I can't do this. I don't know what to do. And we had a really good chat about it. And then the next day I was about to finish work and I got a text message from my dad. And I knew that my mum would talk to my dad. I have a very good relationship with my dad as well. And my dad sent me a message saying, hey, I'm just outside your work. Can we have a chat? And so I went out and had a chat with him. And I knew what we were going to talk about. And it was really good. My dad's such a blessing because he's very direct. And he just sat down with me and he just asked me straight. He goes, Sam, do you want to save your marriage? I'm like, yes, I do. And so then he kind of guided me through in regards of the things that I needed to do to be able to make Nathaniel accountable for his actions, which was unfortunately because Nathaniel was in such denial and didn't want to get outside help, even though he really needed it. My dad advised me for us to separate for a time for him to be able to realize that what he's doing is not acceptable. It's not acceptable to God. It's not acceptable to me. And it was ruining our marriage. Because ultimately if he wasn't going to get help and if he wasn't going to stop, then I kind of was at my wit's end sort of thing. So yeah, I went home and I spoke to him and praise God that he broke down and cried and was like, I don't want to be like this anymore. And so it was really difficult because it was still in amongst COVID and all that getting outside help from like even going to see someone, as much as, Zoom is very accessible and things like that, it is still difficult to kind of get help in that respects. So that was kind of the point there where I had to actually give him an ultimatum in regards of, we need to separate for you to be able to get help because you're not actively getting help now. And I didn't want to leave my husband. I didn't want to kick him out. I didn't want to do any of those things. But because he wasn't being held accountable for his actions and taking the steps to actually get the help he needed to be able to stop, I felt like I had no other choice.
And honestly, he was being unfaithful. I mean, it's not just, let's not try and sugarcoat it,
Yeah, it's adultery.
Yeah.
Did you have any children during?
Actually, no, we don't have children and we still don't. And I actually praise God that we don't have children because I don't know how I would have coped through all of this if we had kids.
Yeah.
Because it was taking such a mental load on me. I praise God that we didn't have children because I don't know how I would have gone being a mother through all of that.
So what did the recovery / healing / realization process look like for him? During that separation, what is he doing to make, realistic steps towards recovery?
So, again, because unfortunately in amongst COVID, he couldn't really go far. And so because we live on a property here, he actually, I said to him that, we had to not be in the same bedroom together anymore. And so he actually decided to live in the back of his ute.
It's a pickup truck for the Americans.
I was going to say.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It had like a canopy on it and everything. So it was like fully enclosed. So he still, we live in a very communal family kind of situation here. And so he still ate with the family and all that. But he and I were very separated in the respects of he did his own laundry. I didn't cook for him. He didn't get to know where I was going, what I was doing. and vice versa, because, if he was living elsewhere, he wouldn't know those things.
Right.
And so we were very much separate from that respects. And so, I said to Nathaniel that he needs to get help. Anyway, my dad is actually really good at helping couples and individuals through really tough times. And so I said to Nathaniel, look, you can find the route of finding a counselor, or, you can talk to my dad. He's willing to help you if you want. That's completely up to you. Because he also had a really good relationship with my dad as well. And so he decided that he was going to get help through my dad. And my dad has actually counseled before in this specific area as well. But it's a specific program for people who are struggling with pornography and masturbation. It basically, you go through it we have a meeting once a week, and you go through the program. So that's kind of where it started for Nathaniel to be able to get help, is that he had to actively make the appointments and actively do the program, which he had to restart twice. He had to restart it one time because he wasn't really clicking with it. Like, he wasn't being genuine, I guess the right word is, with it. He was just kind of like being a bit robotic with his answers and everything.
So was your dad the one that had him restart, or did he voluntarily do that?
Well, it was basically throughout all of this, we were having meetings as well, like counseling sessions.
Gotcha.
Like, I was getting some help from my mum, because my mum has developed a depression anxiety program it was actually specifically for kids. And so I was getting help through that to be able to deal with my side of things. But at one point, I think it was about a month and a half in, we had a meeting, and Dad was very blunt with him in the regards of, this is how your answers are looking. This is not it just looks like you're going through the motions to try and win back your wife sort of thing, but it's not actually helping you. And so Dad gave him the choice. He's like, you either go find someone else to help you, or you restart the program and actually be very genuine and kind of get more heartfelt and more like, you have to dig deep to be able to actually answer these questions properly and honestly, to be able to actually get to a point where you can overcome. Because he had such an emotional disconnect.
Yeah. That's really amazing. I'm sitting here thinking about, your parents, and for them to be very objective and just be like, we want to help this guy. Like, I'm trying to think of myself as a parent. Like,
Right.
if my daughter's, husband came to me and was like, I've had a pornography problem, would I really feel like helping him? Right. Or would I be like, tough luck, buddy, go, hit the road.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I would react that way, but you wonder, it's like they were really truly being a parent to him after he became part of your life and saying, these are both my children, and really seeking to help him, which is awesome. I mean, that's the way it should be. Yeah. But unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. And they could have told him to just take a hike or something. But that's pretty awesome that it worked out that way.
The love of Christ.
Yeah. So that's really cool. So you're working through this process. How long does it take before he graduates, essentially? And then how long does it take for you? Is it kind of simultaneous, or does it take one longer than the other?
I think it really depends on the person and depends on their willingness, I guess. So the program itself, the Road to Recovery, that he went through, it's an 8-week course. Okay. It can take longer if need be, like if you have to review stuff on a regular basis or not. So as much as the program itself is only 8 weeks long, he had to we had to date again, essentially. So he had to woo me again. So as much as the course was only 8 weeks long, there was still that building of trust and the building of the fact that if he was actually genuine or whether he was just going through the motions and just kind of faking it, I guess, because I completely lost trust of him, because essentially he had lied to me through our marriage thus far, because he never was truly honest with me in regards of how he was dealing with it, because he always gave me kind of oblivious, like not oblivious, but
dodging your questions.
What was it like for both of you guys to kind of almost, like I said, date each other again and fall in love again? I can imagine that's really hard, because it's not like the original version of that story where it's like, oh, it's exciting and it's fun and I don't know where this is gonna go. It's like that, but it's, you know, like,
I know what you did.
Yeah, like this is, I don't know.
I don't know
like,
if I trust you.
And how long were you physically separated too?
we were separated for 6 months. It was a combination of the honeymoon phase again, as well as the whole, hey, I don't trust you yet sort of thing. Because there were times where he organized really romantic dates, and, you know, he actively pursued me. And so, you know, you have those, you know, those moments of butterflies and like, oh, okay, he's making the effort sort of thing, like you do when you're initially dating. But there's always in the back of my head, like, you know, is he being genuine? Is he actually, you know, going through doing what he needs to do to be able to get help himself sort of thing. Looking back, I think it probably would have been better for me if we had been separated slightly longer, because I was still struggling with everything in my own head, and to be able to regain trust with him again, I was really struggling with. So during the first 6 months, he was actively implementing the things in the program for himself as well, because like there was things involved in regards of like answering really personal questions, and he had to do a journal, and you know, he had to look at it from a very biblical perspective, and kind of work through the program that way, which then he kind of had to continue through even after the program stopped. Like he still had not super regular check-ins with my dad, but like check-ins in the respects of you know, every few weeks or something. I can't remember how long exactly it was. He actively pursued me, but there was a point in that process where for me my prayer changed, because all the while through, of course, you know, you're praying for him, but my active prayer was, Lord, give me back my husband. You know, I want my husband back. You know, I love him and all that, but, you know, he's done this to me and da 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 da. You know, I want him to be okay, but, you know, give me back my husband. And so it was this particular day where emotions were really high, and it got to the point where Nathaniel, he took off. He ran into the bush because he was broken, essentially. And I thought that I'd lost him. I thought that he was never coming back to me. And I was just crying and bawling my eyes out. And my dad was both my parents were really supportive, but my dad's like, look, just let him be. He just needs time to kind of reevaluate things. Just kind of, you know, he hasn't gone. You haven't lost him. And so I took a deep breath and I went and sat on the back of my car, and I was just praying. In that moment, it was it was such a close moment with God and I, because my prayer changed from Lord, give me back my husband, to Lord, even if you don't give him back to me, as long as he's right with you, Amen. That's all that matters.
Right.
And I think that was a big turning point for me, because it went from me being like, I want this, I want this, I want this, to actually being like, Lord, no, he's yours. You have him, sort of thing, and I'm yours, and so as long as I'm okay with you as well, that's all that matters. So my prayer changed from that point to giving him to God, because we are meant to be, you know, the hierarchy in some respects is, you know, you put God first, not your husband first. And I think at that point I was putting my husband over God, because I was putting such emphasis on our marriage. And so from that point on, my prayer changed. And so for me, my healing process changed for the better, because I looked at myself then more as a daughter of God properly, and more as a fact that, hey, you know, God wants me to respect myself, and he wants me to have standards, and he wants me to be able to live a full and happy life. So no matter what happens with my marriage, I am a daughter of God. I am worthy, because he made me worthy. And that really kind of, for me to change that in my head, helped a lot for my healing process.
So I'm guessing, are there still regular like check-ins? Is there still like some active monitoring that's going on? Or is it like you both are in a position of full trust at this point? Everything is healed. You don't feel like it's necessary to check in? Because I know there's some people, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like, you know how somebody, once they've committed a crime, it can be difficult for them to get a job, right? And there are some like second chance employers, but a lot of people won't take a look at them the second time because of that first offense. And so how far has that carried? And, you know, where do you stand today? Does he have like monitoring software on his phone or computer? Or, I mean, did you ever do that? Where are things at today?
Yeah. So actually when we first separated, I actually asked him for his, because he had an iPhone and he had an iPad. And so I actually asked for those things. And he had every right to say no to me. Like, that was his prerogative. But he actively gave those things up. And I then, for a little bit, I actually kept them in my room to be able to keep them away from him, because he knew those were his triggers. And so, but it got to a point where I actually then handed it off to mum and dad, because I kept seeing them. And so I'm like, I don't want them. And so he was basically cut off from all his technology, because those were his triggers, because it was so accessible. And the job at the time, also, he had just finished up a job as well. So he didn't actually require any technology at that point, because he was contracting out at that point. And so he then, to be able to talk to anyone, he then got a, as you call it, a dumb phone. So basically not a smartphone, a phone that didn't have any access to internet or anything like that. And his mum actually sent that to him, because she wanted to check in with him, of course, as well. And so he didn't have any, for a good solid few months, he didn't really have any access to the internet or technology. But if he did need to go on, like, for example, if you need to go on eBay or something, he would be in the house, in the main house, because where we're living, my Nathaniel and my room is separated from the main house. And so, because I didn't want to be in a room alone with him either, he could use the computer in the main house with the rest of the family, because we have a big family here, living here. So that way, you know, he was kind of kept accountable in that respects. And so that's how it kind of started. And then even now, after all this time, I still don't trust him fully. And I haven't been shy with that either, in letting him know that. Not that I'm cruel or anything, but I would just kind of be like, you know, if he would say something or something like that, I'd be like, look, honey, I'm still not comfortable with that. And he would be very gracious, and he's been very great in that respect. He's like, you take as much time as you need to be able to be okay with me again. And so even though we're 2 years on, basically, because we've been married now just over 5 years, he's still very gracious, and he hasn't done anything to be able to not make me trust him. And so that trust is slowly building again. And so he has actually chosen not to get his iPhone back. He has actually chosen to keep a dumb phone, because he knows for him that's a trigger for him. Even he did contemplate the idea of the software that you can get online and everything to be able to monitor stuff. He didn't even want to try, because he knew it was such a temptation for him, that he was like, no, I'm just going to stick to this phone. It's working for me. All I need to do is send out text messages and make phone calls with it. You know, he has the iPad that he has, which he isn't in a room alone with it, with the internet access. And so he has actually chosen to just keep things that way. So there's a point now where, like, you know, of course, we're back living in our room again. And so if he's sitting in the middle of the day, like doing stuff on eBay or sending emails or something, I'm in and out constantly. And we're actually at the point where I'm okay with that. Whereas previously I was like, no, you need to go and sit in the house where there's people if I'm in and out all the time. Whereas now I'm a bit more comfortable in the respects of we've built up that trust where he can be in the room on his iPad and I'll be in and out constantly doing chores or something. So that's what it kind of looks like in regards of technology wise, to be able to help the temptation of. And he's still very honest with me in the respects of, which is great, because I'll ask him, it went from like nearly every week to now, you know, every couple of weeks to sort of thing, like, how are you going with it? And I'm very direct. And he'll actually be honest with me and he'll broach the topic sometimes in regards of, you know, Sam, I was really tempted this morning after you left for work. But I just, you know, picked up my Bible and started reading, or I went into the house, or, you know, I then, you know, went and did some work in the yard or something. So that's kind of where it's been. It's been a gradual increase of trust.
So you guys are both Christians. How has God come into play in all of this and in the saving and restoring of your marriage?
God has been a major influence and a major factor in it all, in the respects of it drove him to God more so. And for me as well, it drove me to God more so. But it's a daily reliance on God. So previously to this, I guess you could say we were kind of, as much as we were trying to be Christians and trying to have our relationship with God and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, doing the things, going through the motions and all that kind of stuff, and trying to build a relationship with God, I think that it was still slightly disconnected. But through this experience, I think it's made God more real. And the fact that now, because previously we would let our morning's devotion slip, or we would let our, you know, morning prayer together slip. But now we're very intentional in regards of, no, we need to seek God first every morning. And so we have prayer together. So we pray together a lot. So yeah, God has been we needed to rely on him through everything. And we had promises in the Bible that we rely on, like, you know, Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You know, Psalms 121 verses 1 and 2 says, you know, I lift up my eyes unto the hills from whence comes my help. My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And so those promises became very real to us. So that it pushed us towards God.
So how different do you think your experience would have been if you guys maybe weren't a Christian and haven't you gone through this without God?
We would have been divorced, to be honest.
Wow. So your faith really kept you going and kept you together.
Yeah. Yeah. Because of how I was going mentally, I wasn't coping because I had through it all, because I had such a low self-image and self-worth through it all, that I would have got to the point where I would have I guess we're touching another issue there, but I actually got to the point where I was suicidal. And so I would have either gone the divorce route, or I would have left in that respects. And so God kept us going. And so I honestly don't know how people go through it all without God. I can't comprehend that because of the direction I was heading already. Yeah.
Wow.
I think it really speaks to, you know, when you talk about going through the motions, and there probably are a lot of people that go through the motions. It's that Western society mindset of Revelation chapter 3, where you're rich, you're increased with goods, you don't need anything. when in reality there's brokenness. And until we come to the realization that we are broken, we're never going to get the help we need from Christ. And then once you realize your brokenness, you don't see how life can go on without Christ, because he brings the healing and the hope.
Yep.
So for our audience, I guess, listening to your journey, I'm glad you brought out the promises. I thought I was gonna go there and ask if there were any Bible promises that kind of kept you going through all of this. If you were going to give advice to somebody, let's say they find out they are in your shoes, that you were, essentially 5 years ago, 3 years ago. Let's say you're just you're just finding out that you're gonna get married to somebody, right? And you find out they have this issue. Is your advice to them like, yeah, go ahead and get married? Or is it like, no, you need to do this, this, and this first? And then, let's say they are married and they find out they're in the same situation you're in. What is your advice to people being on this side of things and seeing kind of the end from the beginning like you have?
So for those who are heading towards marriage and find out that their partner is doing such, whether it's either side, because women are susceptible to it as well, I would strongly advise to hold off getting married and actively seeking the help required, whether it be from a pastor or a counselor or, someone who's very wise in this kind of respects, someone who's very trusted, because it is such a sensitive topic and people have these barriers against this kind of topic. You need to initially talk to someone that you can trust and to be able to get direction and help, because realistically, at the end of the day, pornography and masturbation is an addiction like any other addiction. And so even if you get help in regards of how to overcome addictions, then that is initial steps that I would take. I can't give time frames in regards of how long you would hold off getting married for.
Right.
But honestly, in my opinion, it should be as long as it takes. To be able to get assistance. And then I guess it depends on the individuals and their willingness and their openness to be able to work through it. I guess it then depends on when you do get married. I guess in some respects, if you're one of the partners in that heading towards marriage and you're like, you still have doubts in regards of whether they've been genuine in getting help, I think that you shouldn't be pushed into the situation of, well, we're engaged already now, like we should just get it done and we'll just keep on working through it. I think that both parties need to be like 100%, okay, they're being genuine, we can still work through this sort of thing. So I guess it's very dependent on the individuals.
Sure.
Because I guess you look at it in the respects of like, okay, if you found out that your soon-to-be husband or wife has a gambling problem, what would you do? So I think we need to make sure that we don't just separate pornography and masturbation from all other addictions just because it's a sexual nature. We need to look at it as the fact that, it's an addiction. So how do we get help for this? And then to the people that are married, seek help, talk to someone who can help the situation, who can give good guidance. I have a friend actually who's going through all this still, and unfortunately, and they're Christians and everything, but unfortunately, because he's not willing to get help and he's not willing to be able to overcome, unfortunately, they are heading the separation and permanently divorce section because of his attitude. And she acknowledges the fact that she should have spoken out sooner, because not that she's blaming herself or anything like that, but, she's gone through, over a decade of all this without any help. And so I want to really implore people that if you are going through this as the person who is addicted, as much as it will be painful and it, can hurt people and all that kind of stuff, be honest. and get through it, because I guess it does depend on your marriage and how it is before that as well, that if you are in a relationship that is in it for the long haul, your partner will support you. It might take some time and it might be really painful, but to be able to overcome, you need help. You need outside help, no matter what. So whether that's from, some of the resources that you can get online, or whether it's from a trusted friend or, a pastor or something like that, that can help guide you through it. But to be able to overcome this sort of thing and keeping your partner in the dark I don't think is healthy. But if your partner is well aware that you are going through this, then they can pray for you. They can support you. They can, still be there for you. Like, I was still there. I was still technically there for Nathaniel because I accepted his dates. Like, I accepted his advances. And so I was still supporting him, even though that we were separated. And like, my story, I don't think is, in some respects, is not unique, but it's still, everyone has their own individual journey on how it works, because everyone's individuals.
I did like hearing that your husband said he had something positive to fill that void, because when you're overcoming an addiction, you might be strong enough to do it in your own strength for a short time, a week, 2 weeks, months even, but it's still going to be a void there. And so for me, I had an alcohol addiction, and when I prayed and surrendered and woke up the next day without a single withdrawal, but the temptation was still there. I didn't have, God got me through the withdrawals. And so I got to where I would just drink a gallon of water a day. I was like, I'm going to drink so much water, I can't even fit a beer in my stomach. So your husband was saying, when you leave, sometimes I have that temptation, and he doesn't just sit around and twiddle his thumbs. He's like, I'm going to read the Bible. I'm going to pray. I'm going to go out in the garden, away from technology, away from the temptation, and do something positive to fill that void. That's such a important practical thing for people that are overcoming addictions, is to fill that void with something positive. So I just wanted to bring that up, that you had said he did that.
And attaching to that as well, for the person who is struggling with addiction, it does come down to your mindset as well, because even in the last few months, Nathaniel really still struggled with the shame and guilt attached to it, because he didn't want people to think of him when they first meet him, or if they go and catch up again. He had in his head, they're looking at me this way because of this addiction that I've had. And in a lot of respects, we kind of worked through it together, and came to a point, it's like, well, ultimately that's their thoughts, and they have every right to their thoughts, but it's in regards of how you view yourself. And yeah, you can still, even though he hasn't used in going on 18 months, 2 years now, he still had that attachment of shame attached to it. But through our study of the Bible and to be able to, our attitudes about it, we've switched the whole, instead of feeling shame about it, it's like, hey, I can give God the glory because he's helped me through this. And I really wanted to bring out that, as I guess from a church perspective, we need to be talking about this, and we need to be able to help people through these particular addictions, so that we can actually give God the glory for helping us through. And that can go across the board to lots of different things in our lives. But by not giving God the glory for helping specifically Nathaniel to overcome, he was still, I guess in some respects, being ashamed and downtrodden himself because of that addiction, until he realized, hey, I actually don't have to have shame for that anymore, because God has forgiven me. Amen. God has wiped away that sin, and I can actually now give God the glory for helping me through. And so as people, we need to set aside the fact that, addiction is addiction, but through God, all things are possible, and we need to give him the glory.
Amen. That really reminds me, as you're saying that, of that text in Revelation 14, I'm starting to think of it a little bit differently just now as you're saying that. It says in Revelation 14, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come. And you think, well, why is it time to give God glory when it's his judgment hour? But if you think about what happens in God's judgment, God has been interceding on behalf of his people. And multiple times in the book of Revelation, especially in like chapters 2 and 3, it says, to him who overcomes, right? Revelation chapter 12 says they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. If the judgment is essentially revealing what God has done on behalf of his people to exonerate them, to wipe their slate clean, to put his robe of righteousness around him. I think this is a very good reason to give God glory when you put it in that light. Like, yeah, look at what he did in the judgment. It's not like give God glory, he's going to like condemn everybody now. It's like, no, look how he was able to be righteous and still be a judge and to bestow that righteousness upon everybody else. And that's a reason to give God glory. You know, he's done amazing things in people's lives. So
That's right.
we are excited to hear of how your story is ongoing and progressing and that there is healing and hope taking place. So thank you for sharing that and for sharing your journey and just bringing up all the little things that you've been dealing with. Do you guys have any other questions for Sam, or
Maybe we can just bring up some resources for people to overcome pornography.
You mentioned Fight the New Drug.
Fight the New Drug, really good website that has so much information. They're constantly updating new information. They have a podcast called Consider Before Consuming. And they also have a specific web page on the website that's called Get the Facts, where anybody can go on there and see the reasons for why pornography is not healthy, is not something you want to, be dealing with, even if you're not a Christian.
Right.
Like there should be reason enough from the Bible alone that it's adultery. But if you're not a Christian or need more resources, boom, 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 they're right there. What's the other one? Oh, Covenant Eyes. Yeah. It's software that you can put on your phone and on your computer,
all your devices.
That basically you have an accountability person. As soon as Covenant Eyes picks something up, it sends it off to that accountability person, whether that's you or a friend or not you, but whether it's your spouse or a friend or whatever. And then also I'm familiar with, I know about Joshua Broom. He is a former porn star who became a Christian and a pastor. And on his website, we can probably put it right here, he has a Christian-based program as well for overcoming pornography. I believe, Sam, you mentioned the one your dad has as well. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So I'm pretty sure it's called Road to Recovery. But yeah, so that one was very helpful for them to be able to go through it because it's specifically dealing with pornography and masturbation. Then also the friend of mine that I spoke about, she sent me through some resources that she has been using that she's been finding helpful because now she is now, a single mother and trying to go through all of that and dealing with the past of all that. And it's a website called Wilderness to Wild. And it's basically support for it is focused on women and women who have come through a traumatic experience like this to be able to have resources on how to connect back with God and how to actually find value, of yourself in God. So that's a good one that she uses. I had a quick look on the website myself, but she recommends it.
Yeah.
And then you also mentioned that you are going through a depression and anxiety program. Because, I'm just sitting here thinking, like, yes, there are other, not to segregate this like it's a worse sin or something like that than other things, but unfortunately, some of the other things, like, let's pick on gambling for a second. If you find out your spouse has a gambling addiction, that doesn't have the same emotional impact on the partner as a gambling addiction does. It doesn't. Because there's that tendency to respond, just like you said you did with, my self-worth is now gone. Like I don't feel valuable as a person anymore because of the other person's actions. So depression, anxiety?
So you've got the Neil Nedley Depression Recovery Program is brilliant. I've been through that in the past, like a few years ago, separate to all this, and that's extremely good.
You know, we hope that this has been helpful to you. I think the one thing that rings through for me is that God is a God of hope. God is a God of healing. And, you know, he doesn't want to leave us the way that we are, no matter what it is that we're dealing with. God wants to deliver us from that. And that's what he came to do, is to set the captives free. So we want to encourage you, just like you've heard from Sam, you know, seek help if you need help. If you find out there's a problem, and it doesn't matter what it is, seek help, and God will lead you in the right direction. So with that, we hope you like this video. We hope that you subscribe to our channel, and we hope to see you again soon. Don't forget that we are also a nonprofit. You can donate to us online, lls.tv/give. We also have Patreon. We also have pretty cool shirts. I'm wearing one of our sweatshirts anyway. You can find those on lightwear.shop. And so thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again in the near future, as soon as next week. We'll see you next time.
Every day is an opportunity to show kindness to the world. Every day is an opportunity to do something that lets someone know you're thinking of them. Every day is an opportunity to give without expecting anything in return. Every day is an opportunity to notice someone in need and to go out of your way to help them. Every day is an opportunity to do one small thing, to show someone you care, to make the world